Hey, Cypher here. The new film, The Birth of a Nation, is out. I haven't seen it, and honestly, I'm not looking forward to it in the slightest. You've probably heard about the rape scandal, and the fact that the director is the lead actor.
But early Oscar buzz has been overshadowed by controversy after details from a 1999 rape case emerged involving the film's star, writer and director, Nate Parker.
But it is possible for all of that to work out. No, it's because it is perhaps the most pretentious title that they could have come up with. Most of you have probably heard of its namesake, and know that the original is racist as all hell. But perhaps you didn't realize how bad it really was. The original Birth of a Nation was the first major motion picture success for Hollywood, and because of its historical inaccuracy, the Ku Klux Klan was revived for another round of terror. This is the worst case of a historical film being inaccurate in history. So today is a prime time to go into why it was so bad, and get some President Wilson bashing in at the same time. Though Birth of a Nation is renowned for its racism, it is also a monumental work in film history. Film students have to watch this movie as part of any competent curriculum. Film scholars have to kind of grimace as they are forced to extol its technical virtues, despite the blatant racism. It established much of the cinematography we still use today. The original was not black and white, but colorized to fit the mood of the scene. Furthermore, this movie ensconced Hollywood as the premier location for movie studios in the US, ensuring the place's dominance. It was also the first tremendously popular feature-length movie, and it made an estimated $50 to $100 million in 1915. If you adjust the movie for inflation and subtract international box office from other movies, this is among the likes of Star Wars, Titanic, and Gone with the Wind in terms of success, if not better than all the rest. Seriously, this movie made Hollywood a thing. It is colossally important. D.W. Griffith, the director, was the main person responsible for the numerous innovations and marketing that made this movie successful. Funny enough, he followed up this racist film with another epic called Intolerance, just the following year. And I kid you not, it is primarily about the evils of being intolerant to others. Some call it Griffith's apology for Birth of a Nation, but Griffith was adamant that that was not the case. Intolerance is actually a good movie, and well worth checking out. It uses color to tell a layered story, kind of like how Cloud Atlas was meant to work. In fact, one YouTuber has already pointed that out quite succinctly. He has a great show, by the way. Anyways, I think you get the point. This movie was hugely influential, but that came at a cost, a real human cost. And all of it stems from its inaccuracy. Birth of a Nation has a complicated plot with branching storylines designed to make you see multiple sides of history. There's some truly competent storytelling here, so much so that I can't give a good synopsis, but here's a quick one. It follows some evil abolitionists and valorous Confederates into the Civil War. After the war, it shows the Republicans behind radical Reconstruction as dastardly people, punishing the South by letting loose the rabid former slaves upon Southern democracy. The protagonist founds the original Ku Klux Klan to fight off the black people's pernicious influence. They do so by defeating them militarily and driving the blacks away. Everyone celebrates, and they even hold a marriage. If you want more depth on the story, watch the movie or read up on it. I really don't want to go into depth here. It was difficult enough to watch again. The truly racist thing about this movie is not its use of actors in blackface playing minstrel characters, or simply showing the KKK in a good light. Nope, that's just surface dressing. It's the presumption that Reconstruction was putative. The main problem here is that it makes the Reconstruction era after the Civil War into something designed to punish the South, rather than, well, reconstruct it. The film shows completely black legislatures and militias wielding their influence to take revenge on their former slave masters. That is, of course, incorrect. Reconstruction was actually something that took place in the North, South, East, and West, including as far away as California. It was designed to bring integration. Soldiers guaranteed the Reconstruction Amendments and Civil Rights Acts that were supposed to create equal rights. The civil rights movement of the 1960s was merely recovering the rights that had been in place because of Reconstruction. The 1964 Civil Rights Act was practically the same as what had happened during Reconstruction a century prior. For the most part, the racial violence was from white people against blacks, not the other way around. There were abuses, of course, but Reconstruction itself was not putative. It was to the point that the main targets of the actual KKK were people perceived to be what was called carpetbaggers. Carpetbaggers were people who would essentially come with money from the North to take advantage of the postbellum conditions in the South. And carpetbaggers were white people, by the way. For historians nowadays, this is basic knowledge and rather indisputable, but at the time, that was not the case. People wholeheartedly bought into the idea that Reconstruction was putative, and I'm not just talking about regular folk. No, I mean this was being brought about from academia. There was this whole thing called New South Revisionism going around. It still is, in fact. Just think of any time you've heard someone call the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression, despite the fact that the Confederacy clearly fired the first shots. I'm sure there's already some angry commenters typing away about how the South was the real victim. That's the idea of New South Revisionism. I'm not going to deconstruct it here, but let's all agree to be kind to each other in the comments section, okay? So guess who was the leading academic of this whole New South Revisionism? You might remember him as my most despised president. Step up and see the one, the only, Woodrow Wilson. Something a lot of people don't realize about him was that he was a prominent historian. He was even president of Princeton University from 1902 to 1910. He was a Democrat who refused to see through his own bigotry. He extolled the virtues of the antebellum South to the point of saying things like this. I'm not kidding, that is him being quoted as a scholarly source in Birth of a Nation itself. Wilson was a racist jerk who embraced the idea that the KKK was doing good in the 1860s. That was an entire movement in the historical profession at the time, and it was only really being fought against by pragmatists like the Beards. I've got an episode on pragmatism coming up soon enough. Due to New South revisionists like Woodrow Wilson, another racist wrote a book called The Clansman. It was quite popular, so Griffith decided to adapt it into The Birth of a Nation. The movie came out in 1915, and guess who was president then? None other than our good old racist historian friend, Woodrow Wilson. Just to make this a perfect loop, Wilson actually screened the movie at the White House, a presidential first. It was a big deal, because it lent the movie legitimacy in the public's eye. Lo and behold, many people were swayed by this movie's message. So much so, in fact, that the second iteration of the Ku Klux Klan was founded in its wake. The KKK of today can trace its roots through a number of generations directly back to this movement in 1915. By the 1920s, the KKK was a nationwide phenomenon with members in every state at prominent positions in government. It was actually intended as simply another fraternal organization, like so many others, but the racist underpinnings could not be cleansed from its genesis. The current clans are of direct relation to this one, but they are so broken up that they are called the Third Klan collectively. The first one was broken up in 1871, and of no relation to the second one, which was founded in 1915. Essentially, it is this movie's inaccuracy that created the KKK. So yeah, if you're going to portray historical content in your movie, it's kind of important to get the narrative correct. The real thing about Reconstruction that Griffith tried to make it out to be was that Reconstruction was like the terror that was perpetrated in Haiti after its revolution at the beginning of the 19th century, and only the KKK saved the South from that fate. Surprisingly enough, in 1804, Haiti had a vengeful massacre to eliminate the race that had formerly enslaved people prior to the revolution there. Essentially, they killed most of the white people who were left after independence was achieved. It is perhaps the only successful genocide in history, and it was perpetrated against white people. Southerners before and after the Civil War were constantly afraid of such a thing happening in the US. Any slave revolt or race riot was seen as the possible beginnings of such a massacre. Later, New South revisionists like Wilson portrayed Reconstruction as such a post-revolutionary terror. They portrayed Reconstruction as vengeful Northerners repressing the South through stationed military, letting loose the carnal nature of ex-slaves upon their formerly benevolent masters. D.W. Griffith used that ideology to make a horrid historical movie that made millions at the box office in 1915. Because of its success, the KKK was born anew, utilizing the same fear to spread hate. The irony of the naming for this new movie is that it is about such a slave revolt that scared Southerners about the fear of a genocide of white people. The Nat Turner Rebellion, which is what the new movie is about, was perhaps the most feared slave revolt in all of US history. And that was in no small part to the fear of white genocide. So this new movie is supposedly utilizing the very same fear that empowered the original Birth of a Nation and its offspring, the KKK, to antagonize their very message. Though, I somehow doubt that the new director is good enough to actually pull it off. So this new movie is supposedly utilizing. So this new movie is